One of the comments I saw a lot about this Imperial versus Navi game was that Navi didn't take it seriously, and that's why the game got so close. But I actually think it's the exact direct opposite. Navi actually took this game too seriously, if you want to talk about what would be required for them to do something like a 13-3 or a 13-0 or something like that. Because, look, if you play this team against every team in the top 10, I don't think they're really winning a map. They're probably not beating this scoreline. Maybe they'll beat it once or twice, but I think this is pretty much the best you could expect them to do against Navi. Here's the thing. This team isn't that much worse in terms of, like, strategically, they're actually quite a good team, I think. They make some small, like, basic errors. I feel like they miss flashes a little bit more than you'd expect from a team, you know, at a top 10 level, but generally, I think they're really good strategically, especially in the mid rounds. They're actually a very solid team. Their problem is Maui Snake said this on the desk, their time to kill is simply too high, right? They just, especially some of their players, I think they have a couple of players, I think Zaz, I think Anna really could compete at a pretty damn high level. But when you look at, I noticed Kat at least once or twice in each time they play against one of these HLTV ranked teams, she's going to have some deaths that are kind of unacceptable. Some deaths where she just whiffs on someone that's not really looking, or, you know, she doesn't get a trade that should be picked up every single time, things like that. And the problem is that, again, they don't kill their opponents fast enough. I'll explain a concept called, like, making your opponents respect you. So if you ever play if you're like a main or an advanced team and you ever play against a team much above your level in something like a qualifier. I've had many times where an example is a premier team I was coaching, they played against 100 Thieves, or, like, you know, the Australian team before they broke up. And one of the things that would happen is that team would just push every angle, push everything, and they would win the 40-60 engagements. You know, you're pushing B apartments, you run into someone that's holding the angle, and the guy holding the angle, you have to be able to win that fight, or there's no reason for your opponents not to just keep pushing these angles over and over, because if you aren't there, it's free control, and if you are there, they can win the fight anyways, right? And so the first thing you have to do against these teams, you generally have to run a spread out default. You have to catch them pushing you. You have to stop them from just being able to run out and make them realize that, look, if they're not going to play strategic CS, they're just, they're not going to win. It's kind of counterintuitive, because you would think, what the hell, like, how would it be harder for you to play against a team that does all of this dumb stuff? Well, like I said, I mean, if you're a top tier team, you can just take so much space really aggressively, and if your opponents can't punish you for it, then you're basically screwed, right? Like, you know, you as the team playing against a team that's kind of disrespecting you, you have to punish them for that, or they actually just get control of everything for free and don't have to use the utility. They can choke the map from you, and you're forced to reaggress into them. You're just in a really terrible position. So again, if you can't make your opponents respect you, then you're gonna have a very hard time winning. And the problem that I think Imperial has against most HLTV ranked teams is they really struggle to make their opponents respect them, because when their opponents do these pushes, they simply can't win the 60-40 engagements. You know, basically the way I think of CS is like, when it comes to like aim versus game sense. Game sense matters, and it's very important, but game sense only actually is capable of mattering once you get within a certain amount, like a certain threshold of aim. You know, if your aim is too much worse, then your opponents can just run at you all across the map, and no matter, basically, unless they're looking the wrong direction, there's no amount of game sense. In fact, game sense can actually kind of hurt you, because you're thinking, okay, here's what a play would make sense. Here's a smart play they could make, and they're going to make the opposite of a smart play because they just want to aim duel you, right? So unless your aim is within a certain threshold, game sense doesn't even really matter. And the problem is when Imperial plays against teams that are HLTV ranked, their aim simply isn't within that threshold most of the time, from what I see. Now, maybe you saw in this game that maybe what happened is Imperial did exactly what Sponge was talking about. If you saw that clip from Sponge, one of the things Sponge said is like, you know, Christmas is canceled, you know, you put in all the hours, put in all the effort, and make sure your aim is on point. And maybe that's actually what happened, because you saw 23, you saw Kat, you saw Tori, and I'd say Kat is, from the games I've watched, the weaker of those three. You saw them pull off some pretty great clutches, hit some pretty nice shots. You know, there were a couple of whiffs, but nothing too crazy. And maybe that's actually what kind of pulled them through, is knowing this game was coming, knowing how important this game was going to be. However, I think in general, this might have just been a day where they were kind of on point. And like I said, Navi showed them a lot of respect from the get-go. They said, look, we're going to play this team as if they're, any top team that we could be playing against. We're going to play our game plan, and we're going to see how it goes. And once you play them like a real team, you're going to find out that they're actually quite good. They actually have lots of trade fragging. They have good setups, good angles, good flashes. But again, if you just play them, and this is what Navi find out later in this game, if you just play them like you're way better than them, then they're going to struggle to force you to respect them. They're going to struggle to punish you for making plays where you don't have a trade, where you don't have, the greatest flash of all time, where you're not at an advantage. You don't have to force perfect. You don't have to play like Rops, Frozen, that style where you're like, I'm going to make sure that every gunfight I take is advantageous. You can just do like the twist style, kind of run out aggressively and win, So we see like this is a standard exec from coming out from Navi. Anna really struggled in this game, unfortunately, and it I don't know, she missed shots that you generally wouldn't almost ever see her shoot. Now, at the same time, you have to say, like, one of the things that this is one of the things that actually Smooya talked about when he played in NACS, and I think this is true for like lower level HLTV teams, like lower ranked HLTV teams as well, where Smooya said specifically, and this is a really nice clutch by Cat. Smooya said, like, look, the reason my stats were so insane when I was in NA, because the stats were like ridiculously insane, NA teams, they don't throw flashes. So it's like, it's insanely easy to play against teams that don't use flashes effectively when you're an opper. You just take some aggressive pathing or an aggressive position. You catch someone swinging out with a bad flash, you get the kill for free. And to some extent, that kind of felt like what Anna was looking at. Now, obviously, no matter how good of an opper you are, right, top tier 1 oppers are going to get flashed off their angles as well. But sometimes you'll see them play like anti-flash to begin with. Sometimes you'll see them play angles that don't necessarily make sense, but they're specifically designed that even if they get flashed, the flash is going to land behind them. They're going to be able to dodge it. If they miss, they're dead, but they're going to be in a position where the flash won't blind them. They can get a kill and get away a lot of the time, or most of the time. You'll see oppers do that all the time. Or like, even if you, like, an example is like Cat here, where like you might see someone play unpeaked, dodge the flash, then peek out and get the kill on the guy crossing, right? And if you're not used to playing against teams that do that to that level, right, then you might end up in a situation where you're kind of caught off guard, get full blinded, and just aren't able to get those openings that you're usually able to get. Although, we did talk about this on the desk as well. I mean, it's not necessarily their style to play too aggressive around the middle of the map, but you can see one of the things they do to disincentivize opponents going for the middle of the map control is Anna went for those aggressive plays down bottom connector a couple of times. She went for that play. I think she went for a play on Cat as well. They go for those plays with the op in the middle of the map a decent amount of the time so that they can disincentivize. They basically make sure their opponents have to like use the correct utility while taking control of that. So here we have just a B take from Navi. Playing heavy, like playing kind of off of B is kind of in the meta recently because, going B is a pretty big risk, right? If Anna is in here, Anna could have potentially killed JL crossing here if she was in market a little bit earlier. She wasn't in market at the exact right time, but you can see how this can get pretty damn risky. But the problem is they gave up mid so easily that you had 2 people up up short, and Cat is completely alone on B. She's really got no chance. And then I wasn't even really a fan of going for the probe into B. You're already 4v5, you've got no money, you've got an MP9 on 23, even probing into B, the best thing you're going to get out of that is you can get a kill or 2, and maybe that can hurt Navi's economy a little bit, but more likely than not, what's going to happen is you're just going to end up, either you're going to get a kill and like bait yourself, it's almost like a negative to get a kill in that situation, because you end up baiting yourself into going for a round that's essentially unwinnable. They would need to get like 2 kills for free out of that to actually have a real chance at that round. More likely they get 1 and then they start going for it and they all die, and now you're in a situation down 5-1. They've just got like pistols, they've got a scout. They don't really have much to work with here, right? But they go for the triple up on A. Navi are just going to head out A very quickly. Insta-kill from Ime. You have Zaz actually should be able to catch them off guard from under balcony. There's one. And Zaz actually was really on point in this game. I mean, you saw it last round, saving, hitting some very, very crisp shots. And actually, because of the triple up on A, this actually works out really, really effectively. Even Tori from top connector gets a kill to turn it into a 3v2. It's not an unlosable situation. I mean, Ana has 4 HP. They have nobody actually looking B, and they don't have the bomb down. I do like, I kind of like the gamble, though. They're gambling off of B. I mean, the problem is, they're gambling off of B with Ana vulnerable to B. Like, I like this gamble off of B, where it's like, if they go B, look, they're going to get the bomb plant. Maybe we can play the after plant. Maybe we can get a retake, right? I didn't like that Ana was kind of in a spot where she could get shot in the back if they go B. But I also don't like when they are focusing on B. I mean, Ana had 4 HP. They don't have the greatest guns. They don't actually have control of almost anything. It's actually kind of risky to even play balance. But in any case, then the rare Deagle animation inspect into 1 Deag. I feel like Cat has been hitting the DM pretty hard, because damn, that was so hype, dude. Watching that one, holy, that was a hype moment. And then it feels like, okay, well, now Navi's onto some pistols. They might go for like this type of B exec. You know, they've been trying to attack B a decent amount of the time. They've already attacked B once or twice. You know, how are they going to adjust off of this? You have Ana again playing. This is kind of like the El Clasico. You have the Operatore's ticket. You have a player inside of A. You have two, like, this is kind of like the Spirit play where they have Donk and Connector, and they have Zontix on short. And then you actually have Tori is going to fight against Wonderful. And Wonderful, I want to see this from his POV, because Wonderful takes a decent engagement. He gets mollied out. He takes the fight. Tori isn't quite ready for it. Wonderful just kind of misses, to be honest. Wonderful, low-key, should be... I mean... I think Tori should be winning that most of the time, but especially in online CS, what ended up happening there is that this is another one, man. The time to kill from Navi is just a little lower than usual, to be honest. But what you're kind of expecting in that type of situation is that you want whoever peeks into the other person at online CS, whoever peeks into the other person is going to win that engagement the majority of the time. And in this case, Wonderful got the peek off onto Tori. Tori wasn't even looking. Tori was looking the other side of the box because Wonderful actually, I think Wonderful delayed a quarter of a second, and that meant that because of that delay, you actually had Tori think, oh, well, he was going to swing out if he's on that side. Now he's going to be swinging the other side. But yeah, I think Wonderful should be winning that the majority of the time. And then you have Bit coming out Palace, gets dinked through the wall. So I think 23 jumps up because she saw that Bit got dinked, but actually Bit got dinked for like 10 HP. Then you end up in another 2v3 for Navi, and this is like they fully invested into this one. And Ana actually waits. Actually, that's interesting. So Ana actually backs up. Oh, she's not sure if Bit already got out before she was watching the angle, or if maybe she was wondering if someone came out ramp. Actually, yeah, she might have been thinking someone could have come out ramp and then be like ready to swing on her. So she played that pretty safe, ended up getting the free kill on Bit. Then you have a 5-3 game. It's going to be like a full eco here coming out of Navi. Big time nade. Oh, I thought it was bigger than that. Again, they do kind of leave Cat on an island a decent amount of the time, and you're allowed to do that, absolutely. But there has to be some amount of doubling up on B. You know, I worry like, so the way playing off of B is going to work is like, think about it like that. You gotta have to think about it like as a pros and cons list for the attackers, right? If you're on T side, one of the things is if you go B and your opponents have 2B, you should be losing pretty much every time, right? Like it should be a relatively easy hold. They should get 4 kills, delay, and you get the rotates, and it should be a pretty well a free win. And if that's the case, then as a T side, what you're thinking is, okay, am I going to go B? Well, if they have 2 players B, then we auto lose. If they have 1 player B, then we have a very good chance of winning, right? And so you kind of play it as like again a pros and cons list. It's like what are our chances of oh my god, no. What are our chances of winning if they have 2B? What are our chances of winning if they have 1B? And how often do they have 2B? And how often do they have 1B? And you're gonna kind of build that into like a game theory like strategy where it's like, well, if they have 1B 100% of the time and we win 100% of the time that they have 1B, then we're just gonna go B every round, right? But if they have 2B 100% of the time, then we're just never gonna go B. And so basically, you don't want to play 2B every round in that case as CTs, because then they're just never going to go B, and you're wasting one of your players. You want to make it so that like 70% of the time you play 1B, 30% of the time you play 2B, and that means from their perspective, it's like, well, there's no winning, right? If we go B, there's a good amount of the time we're just going to auto lose, and some of the time we're going to auto win, but like that's not worth more than like a standard round where we have a reasonable, I mean, this gets really complicated, but the concern I have is like, are they playing 2B enough, right? Like we've seen pretty much every round of the game, they're solo B, or they're, I mean, in this case, they're actually going to rotate off into 0B. Which you have to balance again. This gets pretty complicated, but like this is how teams think about a lot of this type of thing. You want to make it so your opponents can't counter strat you. They're, like you don't have any huge openings. But so one of the things they've done is, by the way, is they baited Navi into being a little bit lazy in middle, right? Because they haven't been contesting middle too much. They've either been kind of peeking off of cat, or they've been sometimes just giving up middle completely. And this is a pretty effective way to go about things sometimes. You kind of lull your opponents into a sense of security, false security. You end up in this situation where you try and catch them specifically at a timing, right? It's not like, this isn't a random thing. There's the smoke in window, there's the smoke top con. This is when they're going to be moving down middle. So you have a response back where after that smoke top con, you have someone go through the top con smoke, you have Tori nade out the window smoke, and they go for the quad peek in the middle, where at a time when Navi is trying to retake that middle control right then. And holy shit. That was nice. Let me see this from Bit's POV. My God. So Bit lined up in Palace, sees Zaz, hits a shot, spray transfer into the headshot on 23. That's one that, I mean, you can't say too much about that. I mean, he's going to be pulling that off against a lot of, tier 1 oppositions as well. But that was a 5v3, now into a 2v2, which is really not what you're hoping for. But you don't yet have the bomb planted, right? So there's going to have to be some cover to get the bomb planted. Tori out through CT. Picks up both. All right. Let me see that from Tori's POV. 30 HP, by the way. 30 HP doing this. Walks out. She's got cover from Anna. Solid shot onto JL. And then is just a quick headshot onto Wonderful. I mean, JL could have found that kill onto Tori. Wasn't an insta-give by any means, but you can't rate that as like a bad play, right? That's one of those situations where, oh my God, okay. Where, you can't hit an insta headshot every single time. So JL picks up one, Anna doesn't hit the trade, now JL's just swinging out. And this is what, Maui Snake was talking about this on the desk. This is kind of like, this is what I'm talking about at the beginning of the video, right? Now you have the aggressive plays. Now they're going for these plays that catch Imperial off guard. And when you're making these plays that catch Imperial off guard, then that's where it all kind of comes down to aim, right? If you're not expecting someone to be somewhere, you can't have like great utility to stop them. You can't have great crosshair placement. You can't have great pre-fires or anything like that. Once you're catching them off guard with these aggressive plays, either they can aim well enough to stop you, because they should have an advantage in general. They should be able to trade. They have better fallback options. They have all of these advantages, right? But either they can aim well enough to punish you for that, or they can't. And if they can't, then you can just kind of keep doing that for as long as you want. And it's going to be very hard to counteract, right? And I mean, you also have the teamwork, right? This is Navi in that 3v3, I believe it was at the end, or was it 3v2? In that situation, it's one of those where Navi also play it perfectly together to make it almost impossible for that retake to happen. But the initial fragging was just a really nice shot from JL, and then you had the aggressive plays, and you're going to see another aggressive play at Ime straight up short here, trying to catch them off guard. He's going to catch Anna, not at all ready for this play. I mean, obviously you had the initial kill from Wonderful, I believe, and Ramp as well. Just looking for a play that maybe Imperial have been going for a little too often in this game. They've been going for that peek off of stairs really, really consistently. And that's another one where, you do have to some extent, you do have to balance that. You have to kind of, in all things in CS, you have to be balancing as much as possible, where it's like you make a play, but also you make a play that punishes the play that punishes that play. It's all the way down, it's like, it's kind of like countering your opponents all the way down, I feel like. But here, Zaz, honestly looks kind of crazy, but this is a play that works really well, because if you look at it from Wonders, you should be doing this type of play. It's a little far from the corner to be doing that, like a far away engagement to be doing that type of play. But if you're ever about this range, maybe a little bit closer, this is exactly what you want to be doing, especially against pistols, because you just make yourself very hard to hit. I mean, if you look at it from Wonder, like that is a hard shot to hit. Now, Zaz could maybe try to make it a little bit easier for herself. Like, she could have just counter-strafed after the first one. So what she's doing is she knows as soon as Wonderful is on her screen, that's when she starts moving. And so you see people do this at the back of B site sometimes, because they're going to sit here. They're looking for this guy to swing in. And this guy swing in is going to swing in looking right here, because this is where you are most of the time. So if you are standing still, even if you're playing a bit of an off angle, like you're playing a little bit to the left, they can crouch, which makes them hard to hit, flick onto your head and kill you, because you're both static targets. That's why Peeker's, like a major point of why Peeker's advantage exists, is because they are a moving target and you're a static target. But I've seen some people, and I think Zaz is one of them, will play a little bit off the angle. Then as soon as this person is on their screen, they start shooting and they move a little bit and then crouch. And that means when this guy peeks out, he's now also shooting at a moving target, right? And it's hard for him to adjust. And he ends up being the static target, because he's going to move in, he's going to stop, you're moving. Now you're a hard target to hit, and he's an easy target to hit. Now you have to pull this off with like the correct timings and the correct amount of movement, because it starts to get really awkward if they actually tag you. You get slowed. That's why you, in my opinion, the main way to get out of that is to crouch, because counter strafing, you have to kind of time the counter strafe, but crouching, you're basically instantly accurate. You don't have to counter strafe. So you have to time that relatively effectively, but it can be an extremely effective way to catch someone, to get a kill on someone when they had an advantage on you to begin with. But I didn't really necessarily like the way she kind of kept going. I would have if she had stopped, she actually probably would have got that kill before Wonderful could actually readjust, but whatever. Look, this almost felt like one of those situations. Okay, I bet we've all been in this type of situation. I get in this sometimes when someone's like yelling at me over the mic, and I'm having a bad game, and it's almost like a self-protective thing. It's like, well, if I don't try, then I can't feel bad for things going wrong. It's like you don't necessarily want to think this consciously, but it happens once in a while, right? And so it almost felt like Wonderful went for the knife play, because well, I'm dying a lot. I got 1D'd in that round, but if I go for a knife kill, then it doesn't matter if I die, because I wasn't trying, right? It's like, it's kind of funny. But anyways, one of the things about this is how much does this really indicate the level of Imperial against other top teams? I think we're going to see the answer to that at Katowice. I don't think it necessarily indicates that they're going to be able to do this well against all top teams. And the problem is, okay, in the interview afterwards, I believe it was Zaz. Who was it? Was it Zaz? I think it was Zaz. The question was what do you need to make the next step? And she said something along the lines we need to be scrimming tier 1 teams. And I don't know. In my mind, is scrimming tier 1 teams really going to make the difference? I mean, yeah, it's going to help. It would make them better, certainly. But when I look at the problems that this team is having, it feels like time to kill is the answer. And are you really is scrimming against better opponents really improving your time to kill that much? Is it not going to be more less about scrimming top tier opponents and more about hitting aim labs, hitting the deathmatch, hitting Kovacs or whatever, putting in the hours, grinding hard? Isn't that improving your aim more so than just your opposition? Although, I mean, yeah, I'm sure the opposition helps, and I'm sure there are things they could pick up. But really, if that is their problem, and maybe someone can disagree and say the time to kill isn't really their problem. That's just what I've seen. That's what Maui Snake mentioned on the desk. Most people I talk to will cite something along the same lines as time to kill. The problem is time to kill. They're just not killing their opponents quickly enough, and they can't, like I said earlier, force their opponents to respect them. So is scrimming against tier 1 teams really going to help them? I don't really see it as the biggest factor. Here's a controversial one, actually. I'll throw down. Missed the jump throw. I think we saw Navi do that also. I think we saw actually Imperial do this a couple times. So, so I saw someone post this, and actually, at first it sounds really dumb. So give me a second on this one. But it kind of makes sense. So when I look at the women's scene, I feel like there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's a good amount of players that can play at a higher level than the teams that they're on play at. And it feels like, at times it feels like what it could be is that these teams are kind of, look, if you're going to have an opportunity to make a living playing CS by playing in the Impact scene, it's obvious, right? Like, there are very few people that are going to choose, okay, let me go play tier 2 CS with a better team and make no money and maybe never make any money and like never get to tier 1 to actually make a living off of this. Or I could play on a slightly worse team, still try and get better, still try and improve individually, but actually make a full-time living. No, you're going to play on the slightly worse team and actually make a living, and hopefully, in your mind, you're probably thinking, hopefully, I can, show myself individually to a certain level where a tier 1 team will pick me up, right? And so it feels like what ends up happening is that a lot of the time, these teams are kind of like, they have 2 or 3 players that could play at a higher level, and they have 2 or 3 players that probably are kind of carried a little bit. And so I saw someone come up, make an idea where their point was like, well, what if you allowed mixed teams in Impact? What if it wasn't women's only, but you had to have like 4 women and maybe you could have 1 male, or you could have 3 and 2 or something. And that kind of somewhat defeats the purpose of Impact, but at the same time, it prevents this situation where it does feel like some of these teams are weighed down by the necessity to recruit players that are otherwise not quite at the level of the top players on that team. And it does feel like, at times, it kind of skill caps them, honestly. Is this viable to actually make happen? Is it, honestly, it might just be like a net negative, like you're actually not getting anything positive out of it. You're actually just kind of, taking away. But I thought it was an interesting idea that, like, because that does feel like part of it. You have Zaz, maybe Zaz could have played at a higher level, right? Anna struggled in this series, but she's one of the best players in the scene. Maybe she could have played at a higher level. Maybe this team could be elevated significantly and could make it through a qualifier or two if they had the extra pieces if they maybe had extra pieces at the level they're at. But maybe I'm overrating them, maybe I'm underrating the other players on their team. It's really hard to say. So you have the fight over mid, and I mean, is what you need, right? So, like, I think the aim from Imperial was definitely on point in this game, right? Because there are times, I mean, you can tell that, more often than not, when they get in gunfights, it does feel like Navi win. But there are rounds like this, and this is the type of round I'm thinking about where, like, you kind of have to force your opponents to respect you, because when you look at this round, this wasn't a super coordinated mid contest from Navi, I don't think. This was like a mid contest that, they had flashes, but mostly what they were doing is they were just trying to duel in mid. They were trying to just peek out from a bunch of different angles, a flash or two at times, catch Imperial off guard with timings that they're not going to be able to expect, right? So, like, if sometimes, if you put yourself in a situation where, like, they're able to expect that timing, they can counterplay you a little bit. But if you just purely catch them off guard, again, you can force engagements that they're not ready for, and force essentially a straight up aim duel or a slightly disadvantageous aim duel. But if you win it enough of the time, then it's worth taking. And that's what it felt like Navi was trying to do there, but Imperial won that, right? And that's what you need to be able to do, again, if you're Imperial, to actually have a real game, to have these situations where you can actually force, tactical, strategic CS to actually matter, right? And here, I mean, Bit honestly just kind of whiffed there, but he immediately turns it back around with 2, and I think he actually, not only does he get 2, but he this smoke in towards balcony, actually, is it their smoke? Like, who threw this smoke? It's a CT smoke that accidentally lands, and this cannot be intentional, but the way this smoke lands actually helps Bit a lot, because it makes it harder for him to swing out, harder for him to get swung on, I mean. 23 could have swung through balcony and traded, but because of the way that smoke landed, she couldn't. And then you just end up in this ridiculous spot. And that's actually wild because I remember watching this live, watching Bit with that first shot. And I'm like, oh my God, he's about to die. He's actually going to die here. And he actually just turns and gets 2 anyways. That was just kind of wild. So 11-7. I mean, you still have a bit of money for Imperial, but not a whole lot. I think Anna went for the aggressive plan towards A initially, didn't catch anything, and then she just peeks directly into Wonderful. And I mean, Wonderful's just holding the angle. Why is he holding that angle? Let's see. He peeks underpass, doesn't see anyone there. Molly's top mid. Yeah, and then they just know because nobody smoked. Yeah. So what you needed here is actually Tori most likely needed to smoke off this Molly at top mid boxes, because if nobody smokes that off, that's part of the reason that Molly's effective. Well, now you know nobody's actually out middle, right? And so if nobody's out middle, you can either set up for the A play and be completely ready for it, or you can just like pretty comfortably control middle, right? Now Wonderful's watching this knowing nobody's out to the right side of mid. He can hold this all he wants. He doesn't have to worry about anything else. Ime actually walked up into middle to help clear it, right? And this is just like, this is one where I feel like Navi strategically got the better of Imperial to a certain extent, because the Molly top box is not getting smoked is a big tell, but they were, again, this is going back to what I said before. It can seem like Navi got the better of Imperial strategically, but they had to take all of these duels that they might not be, maybe they shouldn't be comfortable taking. They have to take all of these duels anyways to get into that spot. And so it can be very disorienting if you're Imperial, because most of the time, you know, you play against a team and they're not going to be in middle like that in that situation. Even if you don't smoke off the Molly, that's still really risky for Ime to be in the middle of mid. You know, it's still really risky for players to be in those positions. And not only that, but they're taking a bit of a risk. Like if Imperial hit A, they're kind of committed to mid, right? It's going to be a hard retake. You know, you can be caught off guard on A or B, right? They're taking a bit of a risk, but a lot of the risks they're taking are based on the idea that they will win the gunfights anyway. So if Imperial go A, they'll be able to retake it, because when you retake A, you get into a lot of straight up gunfights. If they go B, you know, your players, like, you know, you're thinking your player's going to be able to hold it. And if you get into gunfights in mid, you're going to be able to catch them, even if they're disadvantageous gunfights where they're swinging out and you're in the middle of the open, you know, that they're still very much winnable. But here we have Bit, 27-10, by the way. He's having an insane game. 23 goes for the spam, just gets insta-spammed back. Bit smokes himself off, and I mean, yeah, I mean, he's just making some crazy plays. Just look, those aren't plays he's necessarily making in the same way normally. He's making those plays because he knows he can win those gunfights, and if it's a straight-up gunfight, if he's not, you know, in the open getting flash, if he can take a relatively balanced duel, he's going to be winning it pretty much every time, and that's exactly what he does. So to answer the question that I saw a lot of people ask, you know, was Navi not taking it seriously? I think the reason that game got so close is counterintuitively because they were taking it too seriously, or too seriously. They were just taking it very seriously from the jump. When I think a lot of teams, you know, if you play a top 50 ranked team, you know, when I saw them play against Sampi, when I saw them playing against 500, those teams didn't respect them. They just kind of ran it down, and Imperial just wasn't able to aim back. In this case, I think their aim was definitely more on point than usual. So maybe that's just a matter of like how much they practice coming into this, all of that type of thing. But I think Navi gave them a lot of respect, which made it a very interesting game. Not that that's like, it's not a downside that they gave them a lot of respect, but it showed what this team has to offer, rather than showing that what they don't have to offer, which it feels like a lot of the time is their aim, their time to kill.